financial markets in turmoil.
What are the root causes of the financial crisis?
The dollar losing value.
Heading for its biggest loss in nearly 3 decades.
Will Social Security even be there?
I don't know.
Buy or rent?
That's a very good question.
Interest rates.
I'm not so sure.
Where do you put your money?
I don't know.
Welcome to the show that answers your questions. This is Follow the Money Weekly with your host, economist and best-selling author. Here's Jerry Robinson.
All right, friends, welcome to you all around the world. Welcome to Follow the Money Radio. So grateful to have you here along for the ride. My name is Jerry Robinson. As you heard, I'm an economist. I'm an author of the book Bankruptcy of Our Nation and the founder here at followthemoney.com, where we teach people to invest and trade and all about economics, right? Learning a lot about how the economy works. That's what we do here. Followthemoney.com. Great to have you here today. So today, of course, episode number 427, 5 Signs of America's Economic Decline. So basically today we want to go over 5 different signs that show that America is really in economic decline, despite whatever they may say. And of course, in 2022, I think people have gotten the memo. We've certainly seen inflation raging at 40-year highs. We've certainly seen economic pain like we haven't seen in some time. Household wealth has been destroyed at a fantastic rate in 2022. And a lot of the reason why we're having the issues that we're having all boil down to poor monetary and fiscal policies in Washington, and also bad habits that people in the United States have basically adopted due to the complacency that we have in our economic system. And I'm actually drawing these 5 signs from the introduction of our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation. I was just going through the book just a few days ago and was reading through the introduction and was just seeing how this is still so relevant. This book, by the way, now in the 4th printing. This book has done very, very well. In fact, this latest edition we have of the book, it's just the 4th printing, but we also have a nice note in here from Robert Kiyosaki. Those of you who follow Robert Kiyosaki, he has a nice word in here encouraging you to read the book that was recently added. That's kind of nice. But in the very beginning of the book, in the introduction, we lay out several economic trends that have pointed towards an eventual day of reckoning for the U.S. economy. And I want to cover 5 of those today. So let's just begin. Let's talk about the very first sign of America's economic decline. That would be America's low personal savings rate. I don't know if you've heard some of the latest headlines on the saving rate here in the United States, but the savings rate recently hit a 17-year low. The financial state of the average U.S. citizen is looking increasingly grim as we head into a potential economic slowdown in 2023 based upon this number. The U.S. personal savings rate, a key metric of consumer health, plunging to a 17-year low of 2.3% in October. Just think about how paltry that is. I mean, just 2.3% is the average savings rate of the average American today, as of the month of October. Now, that was compared to 2.4% in September, so that number has been dropping, and that's compared to 7.3% just 1 year ago, back in October of 2021, a year ago. And that's even that sounds good, but that's even below the long-term average savings rate of around 8.8%. Really have seen the acceleration of the decline of the personal savings rate as our nation began consuming more than it produced. And we even saw the savings rate turn negative briefly in 2005 for the first time since 1933. That was ridiculous. I mean, that was quite frankly crazy when that happened. Then, of course, in the 2008 credit crisis, consumers boosted their savings. But the savings rate today is still very, very low. Here we are, U.S. consumers initially responding to the COVID-19 pandemic by tightening their financial belts. They raised their savings rates, and they hit a generational high of nearly 34% in April of 2020. People were freaked out. They didn't know what was going to happen. Of course, this extremely high rate was supported by the largest fiscal stimulus effort in history, including government checks, being sent in the mail in 2020. But when you fast forward now to 2022, we find that the savings rate has plunged to its lowest level since 2005, right? Where I mentioned it was briefly negative during that year. If the personal savings rate slips just another 20 basis points in the coming months, it will mean that Americans are saving their income at the lowest level on record. And this lack of savings is just really a symptom, a sign of an economy that's in decline. Again, when you go back in history in America's economy, you'll see that the savings rate has typically been much higher. But in this current environment, even with the economic fear and the concerns that are around, people are still just not saving enough. And before we blame, just the average person for their lack of savings, which obviously, the buck stops with every one of us, we do have to remember that the American government also discourages personal savings through its policies. And you may say, how? How does the United States discourage personal savings? Well, if it hasn't been their 0% interest rates for so long, which definitely discourages saving, and that's, of course, changed recently, but we don't expect that to be changed forever. Typically, the United States will try to go back to a lower interest rate to encourage growth in this debt-based economy. But the U.S. federal government itself discourages personal savings through its policies. Look at the U.S. tax code to find the answer as to why. It has an inherent bias towards consumption. It penalizes savings. It penalizes investment. If you take your paycheck and you decide to do the responsible thing and save it, you will end up paying a penalty in the form of tax on interest. If you choose to invest the money, then you'll also be taxed on any eventual gains. However, if you take your paycheck and you go blow it on a big screen TV or a brand new car, the federal government really never gets directly involved. If the government would stop levying big taxes on productivity and investing and instead tax consumption more heavily, then Americans would be properly incentivized to become better financial stewards within our national economy. In other words, a consumption tax may help us to learn the importance of saving our money. If you go to China, for example, and you look at their savings rate, it's much, much higher than the United States. And the reason why is because the social safety net is not there in China the way that it is in many Western countries, even here in the United States, where we have this perhaps wrong-headed thinking that Social Security is going to be there to take care of us, that the government is going to be able to take care of us in our old age. And the reality is that that's not the truth. We have to save. We have to be good stewards. But we are often blinded by the fact that the promises of government taking care of us. And so therefore, we may not save as diligently as we need to during our working years. And that's clearly the case here in the United States in 2022. So number one sign that America is certainly in economic decline is the paltry 2%, 2.4% personal savings rate here in 2022. And that brings us to our second sign of America's economic decline, and that is an over-reliance upon credit, right? We're talking about national debt, federal level, state level, of course, and then the local level. Then you have consumer debt, you have corporate debt. It just really never ends. And when we think about the personal savings rate here in the United States, as I had just mentioned, it's understandable that Americans are burning through their savings at nearly a record pace as we come to the year's end, because 2022 has been brutal. You have price inflation hitting a 40-year high. You have borrowing costs have soared at the fastest pace in historical memory. You have investment returns on stocks, bonds, and digital assets that have been dismal. And while inflation-adjusted spending levels still remain strong, this appears to be supported by a heavy reliance upon consumer credit. In other words, American households are taking on more debt just to keep up with their day-to-day expenses. So they've already, many Americans have burned through their savings, and now they're using debt just to keep up with their day-to-day expenses. There was a report that was put out just a few days ago that showed that credit card balances had jumped 15% in the third quarter of 2022 and notched their largest year-over-year increase in more than 20 years as Americans fall deeper into debt. And while debt delinquency rates are rising, they are still relatively mild, but that could change as we head into next year, where 98% of CEOs are expecting a recession. But households are not just tapping their credit cards in 2022. They're also raiding their 401ks at a record pace. The share of retirement savers who withdrew their money from a 401k plan to cover financial hardships hit a record high in October, according to Vanguard Group. So Americans are clearly feeling the pain from the incredibly poor fiscal and monetary policies coming out of Washington, and they are resorting to burning through their savings and then relying upon credit to pay the bills. Well, in this way, Americans look a lot like the federal government in the fact that the United States, federal government relies upon debt to be able to finance its spending. I mean, they rarely even have a budget in Washington, perhaps like many American households. The national debt here in the United States exceeded $31 trillion not too long ago, right? Exceeded $31 trillion. That's simply outrageous. That massive $31 trillion debt load amounts to around $247,000 per household. $247,000 per U.S. household. $93,000 per person in America. And that $31 trillion figure, by the way, only includes current spending. It does not include Washington's unfunded liabilities, which amount to hundreds of trillions of dollars. And with interest rates on the rise, you can imagine that this crippling debt load is going to become more and more problematic in the years ahead if rates are not able to come back down in a hurry. The expenditures on the interest alone for the national debt could exceed what the U.S. spends on the national defense by 2029. That's just like 6 or 7 years away, right? And right now, the federal government owes more than $8 trillion to foreign and international investors led by China and Japan. Eventually, they're all going to have to be paid back with interest. And it doesn't matter which political party is in power, the national debt keeps rising no matter what. President Obama, for example, oversaw the addition of $9 trillion to the U.S. national debt in 8 years. That's simply incredible. The national debt rose about $1.1 trillion for each year of President Obama's 8-year presidency. Then you had President Trump, who oversaw the addition of $8 trillion to the U.S. national debt in just 4 years. The national debt rose nearly $2 trillion for each year of President Trump's presidency. Back in 2007, when I was writing my book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, the very first edition, the U.S. national debt stood around $9 trillion, to put things in perspective. Since then, the national debt has ballooned by 250% or more. Meanwhile, America's economic output annually, as measured by the GDP, gross domestic product, has only grown by about 60%. So put simply, America's debt growth is outpacing its economic output growth by a factor of 4 to 1 at least. Right now, the United States is spending over $1 billion a day on interest payments on its debt. $1 billion a day. What could we be spending that money on? Right? This is definitely the kind of empire-ending spending that we've seen in the past, or the Roman Empire, even the British Empire, where they become bloated, they become overextended, and way, way, way too much in debt. America's dependence upon debt has become incredibly reckless in recent years, and Washington is mortgaging the future to prop up current promises. It's a disaster in the making. And like I said, it's not just Washington that's living beyond its means. It's the average United States citizen who's taken on too much credit card debt. Businesses have taken on too much corporate debt, right? The average American citizen is saddled with tens of thousands of dollars in personal debts. The average federal student loan debt balance is $37,000. It's just tough. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're saying, hey, I'm one of those people that have debt and I need help, we've got an awesome strategy and it's completely free. We have a debt stacking repayment strategy on our website. You can download. It's all free. Go to followthemoney.com/debt. Followthemoney.com/debt. This strategy, which is completely free, it's all right there on the website, will turbocharge your debt repayment, allowing you to pay off up to $200,000 in debt in less than 10 years. We've seen it happen. Very, very powerful. But debt is a major problem, right? It doesn't matter where we look. Corporate debt, credit card debt, mortgage debt, student loan debt, federal debt, local debt, state debt, it doesn't matter, right? It's just absolutely outrageous. So number 2 problem we have here is an over-reliance upon credit, right? Another sign here of America's economic decline. The third sign of economic decline here in the United States is simply our debt-based monetary system, where we really have an unaccountable central bank systematically destroying the value of our currency. After the gold standard was abolished, America's monetary system moved from being a gold-backed system to a debt-based system. And this can be seen by the illusion of prosperity that surrounds us. Since 1913, the Federal Reserve's excessive printing of the nation's currency has led to a 95% decrease in the dollar's value. That's the definition of a systematic destruction of something, right? 95% loss of value since 1913. And thanks to the Federal Reserve's noxious mix of quantitative easing programs, money printing schemes, and extended periods of artificially low interest rates, the financial markets have been completely distorted. Then with the policies of 2022, after the Fed allowed inflation to get way out of hand, which they admitted that they were going to do ahead of time, then they came and they started playing catch up, again, $1 short, a day late, as they raised interest rates and then create a crash in household wealth here in the United States in 2022. But no accountability for this Federal Reserve. Since it was established as America's central bank back in 1913, the Fed has operated without any meaningful congressional oversight. And as long as the Fed is allowed to conduct its operations in secret, America's economy will remain hostage to these banking interests. But ultimately, the problem lies in the fact that our currency is just literally backed by nothing except debt. It's just simply debt-based. And this means that no American citizen can claim to be completely debt-free because America's national debt belongs to its citizens, right? This is what many people don't understand about the national debt. They hear about the national debt and say, oh, it's $31 trillion. They think, oh, well, that must be tough for Washington. No, it's tough for you. If you're an American citizen, you owe it. It's not the Senate's problem. It's not the House of Representatives' problem. It's really not the White House's problem. They're not going to be digging deep into their pockets to pay the national debt. They're going to be extracting that money from you. So as they spend and spend and spend and spend without any kind of oversight and without any kind of accountability and without the people saying, hey, let's use some brains here. The irony here is that, again, it's not those who are doing all of the borrowing of the money in Washington that have to pay it back. It's not those who are spending lots and lots of money like a drunken sailor on things that we don't need, or things that we or reserving money from things that we should spend money on. It's all going to boil down to the taxpayer, right? And the joke is really on the taxpayer, and he doesn't seem to know it, which is really devastating. And that's the way it is typically at the end of an empire, right? The crushing weight of the debt. And in our case, not just debt, but a currency that is literally debt-based. It just doesn't get any more, quite frankly, more financially perverse than what we see here in the United States. So that's number 3. America's debt-based monetary system is certainly a sign of our economic decline. Now, moving on to the 4th sign of America's economic decline is the fact that the United States military is simply overextended. The U.S. military overextension, also known as imperial overreach or imperial overstretch, an idea that was popularized by Paul Kennedy in his 1987 book, The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, where he documents the fact that the Roman Empire, of course, was strong and effective until it moved into the final centuries of its reign, where it really became overextended, fighting the Saxons and the Huns and the other barbarians. So too, the Napoleonic Empire, which made very quick gains in the first decade of its empire, then became overextended militarily when it tried to take on Russia in the early 1800s, or maybe even, Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan, which really overreached and eventually collapsed. Well, we have something very similar here happening in the United States, where the United States today, of course, has military bases all over the world, right? More than 100 nations. Over half of the world's nations have a military base from the United States, right? U.S. military base. We've had a nation-building effort going on in many different countries over the last several decades. And this is simply unsustainable. American obsession with maintaining global hegemonic power through military force is justified in the name of protecting the important causes of freedom and democracy and justice worldwide. Or, as former President William McKinley put it, the American flag has not been planted in foreign soil to acquire more territory, but for humanity's sake. However, we have to look at the current expenses of keeping all of these military bases, quote unquote, for humanity's sake, and realize that it's something that we simply cannot afford. The United States military has a larger budget than any other institution on the face of the planet. The Pentagon receives more money every single year. Its annual budget is larger than any other institution in world history. It's also larger than any other institution to date or in our modern time. No institution receives more money to spend every single year than the Pentagon. And that comes from your pocket. And there's not a single problem with that, apparently, because we don't see any kind of pushback from the political right or the political left to an incredible amount of military spending that, by the way, like the Federal Reserve, sadly, the Defense Department, the Pentagon, seems to be completely unaccountable. We have heard many times that they are missing lots of money and no one knows where it went. And there really is no investigation into it. And if there are investigations, they're usually just an inch deep. And we never really get to the bottom of it. So the Pentagon is a money suck. It is sucking money in the name of propping up military bases all over the world that, quite frankly, the United States cannot afford. So an overextended U.S. military is certainly a major sign of America's economic decline. And it just gets worse and worse each and every year when you look at the bloated military budget that is simply just given to the Pentagon to spend on whatever they want to spend on, right? It's really quite incredible. So that's the fourth sign of America's economic decline. And that brings us to the fifth and final sign of America's economic decline, and that is the fact that wars here in the United States, wars that we conduct, are conducted without constitutional authority or an appeal to national sacrifice. Since the end of World War II, it's become very popular in the United States to simply wage wars whenever America wants to. And the United States Constitution actually requires a declaration of war to be made by Congress prior to a military action. But the last war that was officially declared by Congress was World War II. We've only declared war, I believe, officially about 11 times in our history, despite the fact that we've fought dozens and dozens and dozens of wars. Here in the United States, there has never been a full 10-year decade of peace where the United States was not fighting some war in some faraway land. And the fact that the Congress is able to get away with this, to be able to not declare war, the president is able to go to war, the commander-in-chief is able to drop bombs and to send people off to fight in wars, and yet the Congress never has to actually declare war. This is a travesty. This is a dereliction of duty by our nation's leaders, and it's shameful. And it demonstrates the clear disregard that both political parties have for our nation's own guiding principles and ideals when it comes to our military. The idea that we would simply just engage in wars without officially declaring them the constitutional way is another sign that America's economic decline is right before our very eyes. And let's not forget, it's not just the fact that wars are conducted without constitutional authority. So too, because there's no congressional debate, because there's no hand-wringing over whether to go to war or not, we also conduct these wars without any appeal to national sacrifice. America's modern wars are fought without any appeal to national sacrifice. Instead, massive capital inflows from foreign creditors help fund America's military machine. Put simply, America could not afford its current lifestyle of overconsumption and conquest without the kindness and money of strangers. Back in World War II, people were asked to ration. There was actually something called rationing. People don't know what rationing is today. They never even heard of it. This generation doesn't even know what it means to ration. The idea that we have to ration, we have to not use all of the available resources for ourselves because we're in the middle of fighting a war or something like that. This was a common thing that people understood throughout history. It was kind of normal that everybody had to pitch in if you're going to do something like this. But today we go and we fight wars in far off countries, and nobody even knows the names of these countries, and nobody even knows that war is being conducted in these countries stealthily, but we're paying for them. And there's no one who is going to change this in Washington because there's no political will to change it, right? There's no political will to change it. So these 5 signs all point to America's economic decline. And those who continue to believe in the perpetual resilience of the American empire, they just simply have to face the facts. And facts are stubborn things. America has a weakening currency with no clear strategy on how to revive it. There's no real way to know, and there's no real strategy on how to prevent the U.S. dollar over time from becoming diluted by the central banking powers, right? So too, America's debt-based monetary system requires exponential growth, debt, and production in order to expand, and this is clearly unsustainable. America's trillions of dollars in consumer debt have placed massive constraints upon future consumption. America is faced with trillions of dollars of government debt, multiplying with interest by the second, that can never be repaid without completely debauching its currency even further, wiping out vital social safety nets, or taxing the American population into oblivion. Like a race car heading right towards a brick wall with the driver asleep at the wheel, the gradual collapse of American hegemony will not be a pretty sight. What goes up must come down. All the world's former empires have risen only to fall later. We talked about it. Many have fallen by military conquests, others by the weight of their own miscalculations. The Egyptian empire rose, then it gave way to the Assyrian empire. The Assyrian empire rose only to give way to the Babylonian empire. The Babylonian empire rose only to give way to the Medes and Persians. The Medes and Persians, their empire rose. They gave way to the Greek empire. The Greek empire rose and it gave way to the Roman empire. The Roman empire rose and then it fell at the hands of others. And then we fast forward through history, say to 1722. There we find Holland was the great place to be as the Dutch dominated European trade. But then by 1822, Britain was the best place to be as the British Empire rose like the sun across the globe. By 1922, the United States was clearly a great place to be as America prepared to dominate the 20th century. And now here we are at the very end of 2022. Where will the next great empire be? China? Europe? Will it be the United States? Time will tell. But believing that America will extend its hegemonic role far into the 21st century is a sheer fantasy. We are clearly an empire in decline. And the sooner that we, the people, awake to this fact, the more time the nation will have to slow the inevitable.
Robinson from followthemoney.com. If you are a fan of our cutting-edge geopolitical commentary, investing insights, and trading strategies, you will be pleased to know that we are running a fantastic store-wide sale through the end of the year with 25% off of everything. It's the perfect time to pick up one of our powerful trading courses, like our Options Trading University and even our Trend Trading Bootcamp, which are both perfect for beginners. Everything is 25% off in our online shop, but only for a limited time. To take advantage of this special offer, simply head over to followthemoney.com/shop and choose your favorite products. Be sure to enter coupon code HOLIDAY25 at checkout and receive 25% off your entire purchase. Don't wait. This limited time offer ends January 5th. And again, that coupon code is HOLIDAY25 for 25% off your entire order at followthemoney.com/shop.
Hey friends, Jerry Robinson here from Follow the Money Radio. Here at followthemoney.com, we provide cutting-edge trading ideas and investing insights to our global membership community every single day of the week. Sometimes the ideas we provide are just simply that, ideas. And other times, I alert our members to what I am personally doing in the markets. Earlier this week, for example, in a members-only video, I shared 2 new investments that I just recently added to my long-term investment portfolio. It was actually 1 stock and 1 ETF that I added. You see, when the markets are down and investor sentiment is bearish, it is often a great time to add high-quality assets to your portfolio that others are simply too fearful to buy. If you're not currently a Follow the Money member but want to know more about which stocks and ETFs we are buying right now, simply head over to our website, followthemoney.com, and click on the Plans and Pricing button. Choose your plan and become a part of our growing global member community today and get on the fast track to investing and trading profits in 2023 and beyond. Don't let fear keep you from taking advantage of the moment. Join us at followthemoney.com, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, friends, welcome back to the program. We're in our final moments here. I hope you enjoyed today's very special podcast episode, The 5 Signs of America's Economic Decline. It really is no joke. And by the way, if you don't have a copy of our book, Bankruptcy of Our Nation, which I was drawing much of the content from today from our podcast episode, you've got to pick up a copy. This book goes through everything that you need to know about the way the economy works. We talk about what money is. We talk about the gold standard and how it was abolished. We talk about the petrodollar system. We talk about our out of control, military overextension. And then we provide not just all the problems, but we have lots and lots and lots of solutions here. So much in this book. And many of our members have told us that they have gotten copies of this book for loved ones, friends, especially around the holiday season. It's a good idea, even for young readers. If you have a teenager in the family, or you have someone who is interested or showing an interest in finance or economics, put this book in front of them. It's on sale right now. You can pick it up in our store. As you heard, we're having a sale there. Use the coupon code and you'll get 25% off that book. It's a great deal. I would encourage you to check it out. Followthemoney.com /shop. And that brings us now, friends, to the end of our broadcast. It's been such a great opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you for joining me. And as always, I like to leave you with a final word, this time taken from the pen of Dorothy Day, when she said, "You just need to look at what the gospel asks and what war does. The gospel asks that we feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, welcome the homeless, visit the prisoner, and perform works of mercy. War does all the opposite. It makes my neighbor hungry, thirsty, homeless, a prisoner, and sick. The gospel asks us to take up our cross. War asks us to lay the cross of suffering upon others." And that's just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth about the global economy, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and we'll see you right back here next time. Until then, God bless.
Contained on the Follow the Money podcast is strictly for informational and educational purposes. It should not be construed as specific investment advice. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors, including Tom Cloud, are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of FTMDaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry Robinson does hold an insurance license and at times may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Follow-up, individualized responses to email or phone requests that involve the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation will not be made absent compliance with state investment advisor registration requirements or an applicable exemption or exclusion and applicable insurance regulations. Past performance is not indicative of future results. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on the podcast. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted financial professional before making any financial decisions.